It's time to buy your very first pool cue, or maybe even your second or third stick. What questions have you asked yourself? Hopefully those questions go deeper than, what's your favorite color? What experience and information about cues are you working from to help select your next cue? Do you know how different weights, tips, shafts, and grips affect your game? With nearly an infinite combination of cue configurations, it can be a confusing path to navigate. So much so, players may often end up with a cue that's only partially meeting their needs because they don't know how to approach the decision, or they're not even aware of the options available to them. We've put together a loose guide to help ensure you ask yourself all of the right questions and hopefully reveal a confident decision. A live conversation with our cast, who span the spectrum of experience. Each will lend their insights and pose questions to help you on your cue buying journey. This is the Seeking Gravity Guide to Picking a Cue. Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us for the next episode of Seeking Gravity. Today is the guide to picking out a cue. And to be honest, we actually started the journey for this segment going up to a local billiard shop, Jesse's Billiards, and the idea that we'd be able to film this 5-minute segment on how to pick out a cue. And we very quickly realized that's not going to happen. And Jessie did a fantastic job, by the way. And thank you to Jessie for having us up to her shop the other day. She did a great job in doing her job and not trying to push us into certain kinds of cue buying decisions. And that's ultimately the answer that we want to help people find today. And really the important thing is not finding the right answers, it's finding the right questions to ask yourself, which will then present the answers for you. Because as you saw in the video, there's an infinite amount of combinations of cues, and you're never going to find two players with the exact same configuration of cues. So we thought the best way of doing this was for you to have a live conversation with us, and please ask your questions when you do have them, and hopefully somebody can lob them our way, maybe Kyle off screen, he just got spun out for us. But hearing all the different players on the cast and their perspectives, why they made decisions, their thoughts on certain things, and that might help you guide yourself on your journey to buying your next cue, whether that's your first cue or in Rob's situation. Rob, how many cues are you on now?
4 or 5.
Oh.
Don't ask me how many shafts.
All right. So the first thing that I wanted to do was to ask the cast, what was your first cue? How long have you been playing with it? How much did it cost? Do you still play with it? Or if you don't, why did you move on? So whoever wants to go ahead and start. Jordan, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. So my first cue was a vintage cue I bought from a Big Five, actually, when I was 10 years old. Played with it for a number of years and got rid of it partway through high school, and then decided to go out and get an actual cue. So,
Nice.
So I started, I bought my first cue about 4 years ago. I got invited to join a team on a pool league, and I didn't have one, so I walked into a local shop here, and McDermott was the only name that I'd ever heard of in any relation to pool, and so I picked out a McDermott that was blue and I liked, and I played with that for like a year. Hung on to it for a little bit. My second cue I actually bought from Rob was a Sean.
One of his 4 cues.
And I sold it to a buddy. He's still got it. I wish I would have hung on to it, but I have a first right of refusal if he ever sells it again, Jimmy. And then from there, I upgraded to my current playing cue, which is a Predator.
So this is your second cue?
Third.
Third, okay. Oh, that's right, because you got the one from Rob. So why'd you move on from the first cue?
I mean, it was a kind of an entry level, couple $100 or less cue, and as I got better and feel. Actually, I upgraded shafts on that one a couple of times before I switched. It came with the stock, probably 12/8, 13 millimeter maple shaft. And then from there, I went to the McDermott, I think the I2, which is a maple carbon core shaft. And then I got into carbon pretty early on. I think that's why maybe I've stuck with it longer than some people that have made the switch, is because I didn't really develop many skills with maple, and I got into carbon right off the bat. And then, I kind of ended up with the Predator because mainly I was looking for something that had a grip that went more towards the back of the butt, and that's kind of what landed me on Predator. They had some good options, and I like the kind of technological performance side of things. I'm not a big decorative cue person, and that's except for blue, so that's where I'm at now.
Well, before Julietta takes a crack at this, I do want to take a second to mention you're going to hear a lot of words that, especially if you're new to pool, you've never heard before. And so I would recommend that you write some stuff down if you have questions, or go back and re-watch the stuff if something kind of flies right over your head, because there's just a lot of stuff that we have to cover tonight, and we're not going to be able to break out the glossary every time to do that. So this is kind of the entryway into this to kind of point you in the right direction, so you can then go seek out your information based off of what we've provided you. So Julietta, tell us about your first cue.
Well, kind of like what James was saying, I was invited to join a pool team, and I didn't have a cue, and so the captain was like, "Oh, you kind of like a heavier cue, so here, have this one." And he sold me a Viper something or other for $60, and I used, and that was like a 21, might even have been 22, pretty heavy, and I loved it, and was, just playing along. And then I was having really trouble with more finesse shots and softer shooting. So one of my teammates said, "Here," and he handed me this McDermott and said, "Try shooting with this." And the rest of that particular match, I killed it. I mean, for my skill level.
Julia's quick not to give herself good credit.
To be clear, I killed it against another 3 of my skill level. And I was like, "Oh, look at that. I could actually do more with a lighter cue." And so then he sold me that for, I want to say, with the bag and some other stuff, $150 or something like that. And I had no idea if I was getting, a nice bargain from my friend or getting ripped off from my friend. But I really like it, and I'm comfortable playing with it, so I don't care. But I'm kind of in the category of maybe some of the people that are watching. I have no idea. Like when you guys talk about carbon, I don't know what you're talking about, and it intimidates the heck out of me. And that's why both of the cues that I own were basically hand-me-downs that I bought from friends, because I wouldn't know where to start. So I'm interested in, learning as you guys teach everyone else.
All right. I got my first cue when I started playing pool back in college. It was a Q-Tech, I think it was fiberglass is what it was. I think I spent $80 on it, and that was a lot for me back in college. But of course that was 20 years ago. So, that was my first cue, and I played for it for a couple of years, and then just like everyone else, I kind of found my path to upgrading. So. And that's something that we'll get into, is like why you upgrade and all those different things, and why we did it here in a little bit. Casey.
So similar to Juliet, I didn't have a cue when somebody asked me to join a team. So I was borrowing a cue for most of that first season, and then when I continued on for the next season, I went to a shop with a friend and picked out the cue that I currently have, and I love it. And that's pretty much, I don't have any plans on changing because I like the way it feels.
So this is your first cue?
That I purchased, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Nice.
Of all the people at the table, she probably started with the nicest cue as a first cue. So
That's true.
My first cue was, I believe it was called Excalibur. It was like a $90 cue. It was also a fiberglass shaft. That was probably close to 30 years ago. I wasn't really into playing pool. I didn't play leagues. I just would go to the bar with some friends after work, so I bought a cue. And quickly found out I didn't like the fiberglass shaft. And probably 6 months later, I bought a Joss. And I loved the Joss. And I played with it for a couple of years in my early 20s, and then it went put away in the closet, and I didn't play again until maybe 6-7 years ago. And I didn't need a new cue, but I thought, I'm going to start playing pool again. I want to try a new cue. So I bought a Sean. And I bought a Sean because they play similar to Joss. And I love the way the Joss played. And now I probably have 4 or 5 Seans.
It's a gray area.
A lot more shafts than that. So all my cues pretty much play the same in regard to the butt, because they're all Sean's. I like the way the Sean plays, but I've gone through lots of different shafts that all play differently. Carbon fiber, Q wood, maple, low deflection maple. And I generally have all those shafts still. I've sold some here and there, and I've sold some cues that I've bought and turned around pretty quick. But yeah, so Sean's with Q wood is the flavor of the day.
DJ, first cue.
My first cue, it was an action. I think I maybe spent $75 on it. And actually, this one I have here is the second one I bought. I got this one in 2016. Yeah, so I had it for a while.
Yeah, that one's been in your rotation since I've known you.
Yeah.
You've put it in timeout a few times. But
Yeah. I got a Purple Heart Roadline. Used that for a while, but I went back to this one. Yeah.
And that one's seen a couple different shafts too.
Yeah, I went from the 3-point, the 314, the one it came with, and then I use a Q-Tex Synergy carbon fiber.
Yeah.
My hands are really clammy, so I like having it where it doesn't get that buildup on the maple shaft. So, yeah.
So one of the things that you've already seen a few of the cast members talk about are the fact of interchanging butts with shafts. And that's something important to point out right now, just because it's been mentioned a few times, is you can, typically, would you guys agree, I mean, all components of the cue will give you the overall feeling of a hit, but a brand of cue will typically have a same familiar hit coming from the butt end of the stick. And it's hard to explain. I don't know what it would compare to in other things in life, but different brands of cue just kind of hit the same way. They also kind of bounce the same way as well, typically.
I mean, different shafts are going to give you a different hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
So
definitely
it's
get
hard to say, but if you were to put the same shaft, on a different butt, you would
Yeah.
probably get the same hit.
Yeah, and then you've noticed a lot of players mentioning that they've got multiple shafts or they've changed shafts out on the same butt. And as long as they have the same joint type, you can do that, and those give you different playing characteristics, which we'll also get into here in a little bit. But next step is, again, we did mention we went up to Jessie's shop a little while ago, and she was awesome and let us, our players, hit a number of cues, which I guess might be a little bit on the rare side for a shop to be able to do that. But she was totally game for letting us to do that. And she kind of did a little impromptu game with us, and it was guessing the tier of cues. So she likes to break down cues into 3 main categories. There's a lot of categories, but if we now want to narrow it down, she kind of liked to narrow it down to like a $75 cue and below, 75 to 300, and then 300 and up. And when it comes to prices of cues, I mean, the sky's the limit.
Up can be up.
Yeah, it can be more than your car's worth. So what we had her do was calibrate 3 different cues so they weighed exactly the same. And the thing that was different is the price point, the sticker that was on the cue. And it took all those stickers off, of course, and then we were able to shoot with those to see if we could honestly even identify the difference between these different cues. And I know, I'll go ahead and spoil the first one. I know that everyone was immediately able to, I think from hit 1, identify the least expensive cue. What was it about the least expensive cue, that 75 and lower, that gave you that indication?
It was the vibration.
Yeah.
When you actually hit it, you could tell
It was
right
a little
away.
bit of everything for me.
Yeah.
Balance, the feel, the tip feel, the hit feel. It was
The sound.
Yeah, it made
Yeah.
a loud thunk
Yeah.
kind of sound.
it was very obvious you were playing with a budget cue.
Okay. So when we talk about that thud, I heard it too. It was almost tinky for me.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
felt almost hollow, or
Yeah.
maybe like even like it obviously wasn't. It wasn't like balsa wood, but when you're used to a higher end cue, you hit that and you're like, whoa, this is not for me anymore, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it's safe to say, as you climb the ladder of cost in a cue, every component along the way of the cue is going to be higher quality, from the tip to the shaft to the butt to the joint type, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So then between the 75 and 300 and the 300 up cue, were you guys able to like clearly tell the difference still?
It wasn't clear to me. I preferred one of them slightly just because of just like a smoothness of the shaft. And other than that, how they kind of played the same to me. I couldn't tell as well as the rest of you could.
I actually, if I remember correctly, I found myself preferring that middle of the road cue. It played really nice. It was a nice cue in a fairly priced margin. That could have just been because I didn't particularly like the feel of that more expensive premium cue. But it was obvious by looking at those cues which one was the high end. The craftsmanship looked a little bit better on the high end cue, but when it came to how they played, I thought the $75 to $300 cue played it surprisingly well.
Any other
I
thoughts?
do know a couple people. We had mentioned that we wanted to switch the shaft with the butt. So some of us liked, I think one of them was linen and the other one was like, I can't remember, a different type of
Maybe
grit.
one of them had leather. Huh?
Leather.
Leather,
Yeah.
yeah, and I know we wanted to switch the two because we liked a lot of us like the linen wrap over the leather, and so I know that might have maybe influenced some people's decisions too on why they liked one over the other.
Can you recall the prices of the middle and the high one? I know the high one was, I think it was 900 or 1,000 or something like that. And was the middle one like 180 or something like that?
It was pretty low.
Yeah.
I know it wasn't over 250. Yeah.
I think it was 180
Was it
or
under
190.
200 even?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was. It was a decent cue for that
There-
money.
There might be people going like, whoa, only 180?
Only.
Yeah.
Only
Uh-huh.
180?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like, I guess, anything else in life, when you start getting further and further down the rabbit hole, the investments can get kind of crazy, and perspective on pricing gets kind of a little distorted. So, so that kind of leads us to pricing and performance. So we've started kicking around a lot of ideas, and I promise some of them will start to close full circle here. But, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, if they haven't bought a cue before, or they're even buying their second or third cue, they want peak performance regardless. Okay, money's not an option. I don't care about pricing tiers. If I want the best cue out there in terms of performance, what should they be looking to spend? And what does top peak performance look like? What are they getting? Like, what are the elements of that cue that make it a high performing cue? Anybody?
I feel like you got to spend $600 to have a top performing cue, and it's a lot because of the shaft. Any top performing shaft is minimum $300 right there into the shaft. So even if you get a plain Jane butt with no inlays, nothing on it, you've already got $300 to $400 tied up into a shaft, and that's not even carbon fiber. Those are top of the line wood shafts. And then you got a $200, $300 butt. You're $600, and I think a $600 cue is going to play just as good as most $5,000 cues. I'm sure there's exceptions there. I'm sure I'll get nailed in the comments about that for somebody that's got a black bore out there and they insist that it shoots better. But
Yeah, so what Rob's alluding to is that we wanted to kind of be very conscious of framing that peak performance, because you can spend thousands upon thousands upon thousands, and that's because typically the design, the craftsmanship, the name on the cue, maybe it's got ivory inlays. I don't think you can do that anymore. So you were talking about probably the
Yeah.
used cue market.
Right.
So, you know, there's a lot of that price point once you get past. I would probably put the peak performance right between $600 and $1,000. It's a little loose, especially depending on the brand, because certain brands demand more money than others.
Yeah.
But they're more or less on par. If you were to stick them in a professional's hand, they say, yeah, these are about the same. But you know, you can spend thousands and thousands, and it might not play as good as a cue that's literally dialed in for peak performance. It's just because it's pretty, or it's designer name, or whatever that might be. So kind of on that peak performance thing, one of the things that we've kind of alluded to, and that when we're talking about shafts, and a good plane shaft, we're typically talking about low deflection, right? So low deflection's a rabbit hole. We'll let you guys travel down your own, because it's a hairy one, and it's got a long history to it. But just to kind of get into that a little bit, that's the reason why you're seeing these black shafts on these, and I'll actually just kind of break one down for you guys right now, if I can. So this black shaft is carbon fiber. And there's no wood in it. It's carbon fiber and what, foam sometimes in the core, or all the time?
Depending on the manufacturer, different manufacturers will fill them with. Most of them are foam filled to lower vibration. Some use different foams, different tips, and real kind of like briefly, when we're talking about deflection, it's how much your ball travels offline when you're hitting it off center. And the lower the deflection, supposedly, the more you're able to anticipate control. And so that's kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about that.
Right. Yeah. So, and then you've got either really, really hard maple shafts, and you actually have maple shafts that are actually, like Predator makes it, I'm sure others do. They kind of take, there's like 60 different pie slices of wood grains and
Laminated,
glue them
spliced,
together and
Yeah.
pied
Yeah.
shafts. They all call them something different, and all the manufacturers have their own little recipe for that. OB, for example, does like a crescent-shaped pieces, and they put multiple crescent pieces together, and then they mill the shaft out of that. But yeah, at the end of the day, low deflection maple shafts are always multiple pieces of maple that have been spliced together.
So typically, if you're in the aftermarket shaft buying experience portal, it's you're looking at lower deflection shafts. It's going to give you, in theory, a more accurate hit when it comes to applying spin to the cue ball, and that's why people pay big money for them. A typical low deflection shafts, anywhere between $300 and $500.
Yeah.
So just in a shaft, if you're going that route, that's what you could be looking to spend if you want peak performance, right? So kind of coming back now that we've kind of filled that gap a little bit, when we talk about those different price tier ranges, that $75 and lower cue isn't going to have a shaft that's going to give you, in theory, very low deflection qualities.
Yeah, it's going to have a low-grade, solid maple shaft that's basically just been turned out of a piece of maple, had a joint and a ferrule and tip put on it, and there's no technology that goes into it. It is what it is, and a lot of people really prefer that. That feel.
I mean, that said, some of the best players in the world
Yep.
still play with standard maple shaft, non-low deflection.
And it's a feel thing, and it's an experience thing. When you've been playing with it for years and years and years, you just know how it plays, and it's a comfort level.
Yeah, you know how much that ball is going to veer off course, and so they've corrected for it, and they've done it for decades. And putting them on a low deflection shaft would essentially, they have to re-engineer their stroke or their sight line, or probably both at that point in time. So that's what you're going to get with that lower tier cue, the shaft that's going to come on it. That middle tier will typically have a somewhat of a premium shaft, maybe starting to flirt with the idea of throwing around the world lower deflection. And so you'll still get a slightly better shaft in terms of deflection. And then when you're talking about that 300 and up, now that's when you're starting to get cues that are coming specifically with shafts with low deflection purely in mind. They'll throw that a lot in the marketing as well. So cool.
And they'll also tend to throw in, when you buy a cue, just a standard, just their standard middle of the road shaft. And then if you want to upgrade, like to a carbon fiber, you'd have to do that either at the time of purchase or later.
Yeah, they're getting carbon fiber is getting so mainstream now. They're coming in cue sets.
Sure.
A lot of brands are pushing them really hard, and so you'll probably see more of their cues coming with carbon fiber than wood.
Yeah.
So, but you'll obviously see that reflected in the pricing as well. You're like, why is that more? And you're like, oh yeah, it comes with carbon fiber, so it's kind of baked in the price. So with that said, we've talked about kind of the recipe for a peak performance, the baseline for peak performance. Should people, brand new players, should they expect to be playing better with a $1,000 cue versus a $75 cue? What are your guys' thoughts on somebody who's brand new to pool and they go out to go play? What would you recommend for them?
I would say that person would really need to look at what do they think pool is going to become for them. If it's going to be a once a week, get out of the house, hobby type of thing, you probably don't need a huge upfront investment. But if if you're brand new, you're getting into it, and you think, okay, this is going to be my new hobby, I think starting with a higher performance cue is not necessarily going to make you play better out of the gate, but it can make you more consistent. It will shorten some of your growing pains when you do want to progress. I think we're seeing a lot in amateur pool right now. with, some, solid middle of the tier amateur players. When carbon started coming out, they started making that switch, and we're seeing a lot of players go back to a low deflection maple or something like that because they got comfortable with maple before, and they haven't been able to bridge that gap. Whereas for me, I started with carbon fairly early on, and now when I go back, I feel lost. Even with a higher performing maple shaft, and so I think it's individual for everybody, which is kind of what we're learning as we're going down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, I went down that road myself. I mean, I played for a few years with standard maple shafts, then I'd gone to low deflection shafts, and then I tried to transition to carbon fiber, and you ended up buying
That's
that
how I ended up
for me.
with carbon fiber.
Because the carbon fiber wasn't for me. It was too big of an adjustment on how I had already learned how to play. And so then I found my current home in the keelwood shaft, which was kind of a halfway in between the carbon fiber and the low deflection. But I took the chance to upgrade my wife to carbon fiber almost immediately because she didn't know how to play English yet. And I wanted her to just learn how to play English with carbon fiber because it's easier to play English with carbon fiber. So if you can afford it as a new player, I say go all in on a low deflection shaft at least, if not carbon fiber. If that's not in your budget, you just know that you're going to have some relearning to do if you stick with the game of pool and you want to move into higher level equipment later. You're going to have to learn to adjust for not having the deflection that you would have had with the maple shafts. Yeah.
Well, and be prepared too if you're a brand new player, first time playing, whether it be with friends at a bar or at a pool hall or something like that. Be prepared to get a couple nicks or dings or different things. People walk by, knock your cue onto the floor. So your first cue is going to get a couple of, I think we've all had our first cue or even second cue hit the ground or whether accident or different things. So keep that in mind when you're making your purchase as well.
That's where I think the biggest advantage is to carbon fiber, honestly. It's the most idiot-proof shaft there is.
Yeah, I mean, if
You can drop it, hit
Now,
it on
don't
the
go taking
table.
a saw to your carbon fiber. It will still break,
Yeah.
but not nearly as easy.
But you can beat up on them pretty bad and nothing happens. That said, if you do mess up a carbon fiber shaft, there's no fixing it like there is a wood shaft. Your host. Maybe there's somebody out there doing some kind of stuff on a carbon fiber shaft, but I'm not aware of it, where wood is pretty forgiving.
But just keep in mind too that when you do buy your first cue, it is wood. And you leave it in your car or in your trunk overnight or in a spot with high or low temperature, it will bend and it will warp, and then you're wondering why am I aiming center but the cue's going that way, or all different things.
Yes, I did that.
So.
I was like, why? Why? And my captain was like, are you keeping this in your trunk? I was like, yeah. No one told me.
Yeah.
So that was a good public service announcement.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
quick segue. Speaking of fixing cues, so when we were up at Jesse's shop, Casey had pulled a cue. I can't remember why. I think we were talking about your shaft or how thick your shaft was. And I half a second I had my hand on your shaft. I was like, when was the last time you cleaned this? And she's like, what do you mean? Like, you don't, I mean, it was like sandpaper almost, or like glue was on it. And I was like, oh, you got to have Jesse take care of this. It's going to feel like a brand new cue. And so Jesse, you saw some behind the scenes shots of me photographing Jesse working, and that was her actually working on Casey's shaft. So what was it like before and after Jesse got a hold of it?
Well, so I feel like if you look at playing with, maybe 60 sandpaper and then you go down to like 210 sandpaper, it was a lot smoother. I don't think I even really noticed it because that's what I was playing with all the time. Nobody ever says anything to you when, you're a new player, like, hey, so this would be a good thing to do. Mm-hmm. She actually gave a really great tip to me, is every time you go wash your hands when you're playing at a bar, like grab that paper towel and just run it along your cue when you come back, just because it will help just keep some of that grime, and we all know chalk and everything that gets on it, to keep that down. I did, guys, buy something to clean my cue while I was there, so I do clean my cue now. I think it's just a lesson learned, and so now it's a lot smoother. Might be why, I'm playing a little bit better. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a whole different topic, but if you're going to invest in something, and I would say an investment's $100 and up, I mean, honestly, make sure you buy a case for it. You'll see people with soft cases or just a sleeve sometimes. It kind of makes me cringe. Get a hard case that costs $10 extra, and then also learn how to maintain and take care of it. Like, don't leave it in your car, and clean it every 17 years, and those things. It's good to kind of research that stuff as you're going along your journey of figuring out which cue you want to get as well. So right now, I've noticed, since just knowing you guys, us been doing this for a couple of years now, some pre-recording stuff, we've started changing cues. There's been some changes on the table here that's taken place. So how long have you guys been playing with your current cues? Are there any plans on changing anything anytime soon? What's going on right now with your guys' cues?
I'll start. I got mine, 2016? So, is that 7 years? Yeah.
And the shaft also?
No, the shaft upgraded. I got that, I think, 2 years ago when I was down in Vegas. I got that one done. No immediate changes in the future. I like it. I mean, it feels natural, so.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm playing that Sean here for maybe the last 3 to 6 months. But like I said, I have other Sean butts that I'll occasionally play with, but they play the same. The keelwood shafts I've only been playing with for about 3 months, and I have 2 of those, just different sizes.
I've been playing with mine since I started, pretty much. Only 1 season, so about a year and a half. I don't plan on changing anything about it, just keeping it clean.
Well, yeah, and you got that shaft brand new now, so why change it, right?
Well, I actually have 2. So when I did purchase this one, it came with a thicker shaft, and I didn't like that feel. I needed it to be more tapered and thin, so I actually have 2 shafts. The other one's in perfect condition. It doesn't look like it's been used, but I think it might be beneficial too for people to feel comfortable when they go and look at them, to try a few different types of shaft. Because for me, I didn't even know that I could get a different shaft on this when I was buying it. And I just thought I had to get what was there. And I was like, but I really want something that's thinner for my hands. And they're like, well, you can.
So, and in yours, I can tell you because I've seen your shafts. This one is low deflection. The other one is not. It's just a standard maple shaft. But that's pretty common with how Pachauer does things. They'll give you that standard maple shaft, and you can upgrade to the low deflection. But usually they'll just say, oh, you pay another $100 and we'll give you the low deflection, but we keep the maple. But in your case, you got them both.
A lot of people actually will carry multiple shafts at the same time in their case, and that could be for a multitude of reasons. They could be different shafts. I, for example, have 2 carbon fibers in my cue case at all times in case I have a tip go bad on me. So if I'm traveling and my tip pops off or something, I've got a backup ready to go. So that's another reason why that happens. I actually switched. You guys will see a video segment here shortly when we finish this conversation, but between that video segment and now I have switched, and it was purely, I didn't change brands or anything. It was simply because I wanted to get my cue weight a little bit lower. I play with, and this is kind of another tangent, I actually play with what they call an extension on my cue. It's a little 3-inch extension that just makes my cue a little bit longer. I am a taller guy, and so oftentimes I find my hand off the back end of a cue, and so this allows me to get further back on the cue, and for reaching for further down the table shots. There's a lot of shots I can shoot just with that extra 3 inches on the back end that I'd need a bridge normally for. So that's why I have switched. So I was able to get my cue weight down another, I think, an ounce-ish. So, yeah.
I got that one, like I said, from a teammate, I want to say in 2018. I've just, I don't think I play pool as many nights as a bunch of you guys, so I'm a little more of a casual player. But I'm super curious about the low deflection thing, because, accuracy would be good. Yeah, that would be my only thing that I might, if I consider upgrading, I'd look into that.
James?
I've been playing with mine in its current configuration for the last 6 months or so. So I also play with a Predator with a synthetic wrap, and what led me to this cue is similar to Matt. Not that I'm as tall as him, but I tend to grip fairly far back on the cue. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And I also have an extension on there, but you can see most cues here, the wrap, leaves 4 inches or so on the back. My wrap goes almost all the way to the end, and I also see
Yeah,
the
so
difference
his is right
there.
at the base of that silver part.
That's been a thing for you since I sold you the Sean.
Yeah, I actually had a local cue guy change the wrap on my Sean, and it extended all the way back with a stacked leather wrap. And I'm playing a little heavier now. I'm over 21, right? When we
What
measured
were
it?
you? You're 21.7.
Yeah, which is pretty heavy. I've been messing around with weight since I've switched to this shaft. So this is not the stock shaft. Most higher end Predators come with their Revo shafts, which I really like. But this is a narrower 12.25 from a local company out of Bellingham called White Carbon. And I've been playing with that for about a year or so. But no plans to change. I'll probably continue to dabble with weight a little bit here and there. And then we haven't gotten to tips, but when we do that, we can talk about tips as well.
So Jordan, you just got a newer purchase, right?
I did, yeah, and I actually bought the cue from Rob.
Rob only has 4
Rob,
cues.
yeah.
He only has 4
Oh
cues.
shoot, I lowered his
He's
inventory.
down to 2.
Janice, you're welcome. Yeah, so the Predator works well. The big reason I was playing with McDermott, and I do like McDermott cues, I just was looking for something that had a pin. So, mine's called a quick release, so you just have to spin it a couple times, and I don't know if you're able to see it there, but it might not show up, but it's just a pin, so it's quicker to take on and off the shaft, because I was tired of standing there and turning my cue for a while.
It sounds silly, right? But
Yeah.
so these quick release unilocks, I mean, it's a twist and a half maybe, whereas there's some 3/8 10s, and it feels like it's a 5-minute. It's a forearm workout, right?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yours is 3/8 right?
Yeah.
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 We should have a
McDermott's typically are.
We should have a race. Predator versus McDermott.
I'd lose every time.
Yeah.
But the one thing that is a difference for me is Rob, I even had him take out the weight bolt in this because I really like shooting with a really light cue. My cue I was using was like 17 ounces, 17, just over 17. And this one's 18.45, and I would like it lighter, but the weight bolt's out of it, and so it's as light as it's gonna get. So, but I do like it. And the bonus side about me buying it from Rob, someone I know, is I could chalk it up, I could test it, I could hit it around, and decide if I liked it, rather than looking online going, I like the look. I have no idea how it feels, but I'll take a risk. So where that was no risk, because if I didn't like it, I could just say, sorry, Rob, I'm gonna keep looking. So.
And again, we've hit on a lot of things here. We are going to try and come full circle with a lot of these. So I promise we'll ground a few of these. But you kind of need to bring up these questions, these ideas, so that we start talking about them in detail. It starts to make more sense. But with that said, buying mistakes. Have you guys had any purchases that you've regretted, or any things that you would recommend people don't do?
I've had more selling mistakes than buying mistakes.
All right.
Kicking yourself when you get rid of a cue. But I think, I don't know necessarily about buying mistakes, but I think just maybe if you're getting into it, play with some teammates' cues first, get a feel, find a shop that'll let you hit them. Because you could order something online and play with it for 6 months and be like, oh, this is what cues feel like, and then as soon as you try something else and you're like, oh, I like this way better, but how do you know? It's you could really dive in and spend a lot of time figuring things out. That's why support your local shops and get out and get them in your hands and go from there.
Yeah, and we'll kind of finish this segment on that topic, but just since you reminded me of it, it's really important to get out there and hit cues. All the brands hit differently. There's a reason why Rob loves Sean Q's. I've never hit a Sean Q. I don't even know if I want to because I like the way my Q hits, and I don't want another one in my mind right now. But it's really important that you do go through that process of hitting different brands because they truly, it sounds weird, they truly all have a different feel to them when you strike a ball, and you just have to do it to feel that sensation. But any other buying mistake things you guys have done?
I know one that I've done. Granted, you and I are gonna differ, but my first like break jump cue I bought because I was like, oh, I got a jump cue with a break cue. Great, 2-in-1. I did not like it. I didn't like. I like having a jump cue and a break cue. I don't want to have to break down my jump or my break cue to make a jump cue, or I just couldn't. The one I had, I just didn't like. And as soon as I ended up getting the jump cue I currently have, I love it, and I love having them separated. So
I'm in your ballpark. I feel like if something's designed to do two things, it's designed to do nothing. So you know, there's reasons, there's specialty stuff out there.
Agreed. I went down the same road.
I've never jumped or broke better than with my jump break cue. So there's that.
Yep. And
So-
everybody's got their different.
See, everything's cut and dry.
Yeah.
100% factual.
But have you ever played with a dedicated jump cue?
Yeah.
Because your jump
Oh,
cue
I've had three
before
of them.
was a
Yeah,
two-piece
yeah,
also.
I've had 3 of them.
Because you were playing with the McDermott.
Yeah, that
Break
was the
jump as
Stinger.
well,
Yeah, I was
right?
using
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I just think the dedicated jump does way better. I'm with you guys. I wouldn't say that I had any big mistakes with equipment, but I had plenty of equipment that I went through that wasn't for me, but I don't think it was a mistake because they all led me to find what I like, and now I know I can just look at something and go, yep, I'm going to like that based on it. This is what it is. It performs that way. I know I like Sean butts. I won't mess with my butt anymore. I just play Sean's. But I'll probably change shafts when new stuff comes out. I'll try them, and a lot of times I'll try it, and it'll get resold because I don't like it. Was it a mistake? No, I found out I didn't like that.
So it's just a learning experience.
Yeah, I mean,
Not a mistake.
You gotta keep checking out new stuff as it comes out. In my opinion, to know is there something better for me. Right now, that is the best cue for me. I've played with probably everybody on this table. I've played with their cue. I've played with several other people's cues. I've played with several of my own cues, and I know that's the combo for me. But it might not be next week.
Yeah, well,
Is
Sorry,
he
guys.
setting up to buy a new cue already?
Yeah, pretty
Threw
much.
that disclaimer in there.
Yeah, it might be next week.
UPS is ringing your doorbell right now.
Is this one for sale?
No,
but
it
one
is
thing talking
not.
about mistakes is, point out is probably more than most other sports, there's a huge secondary market for pool cues. And people get burned, buying stuff online, direct from other people. So when you're on those type of sites, Facebook pages, whatever, make sure you're getting references if you're buying used cues, that sort of thing. There's, you hear stories all the time of people sending money and nothing shows up, or what shows up wasn't what was for sale.
Yeah.
And so that is one mistake that luckily none of us have run into, but we all probably know people who have run into that or heard stories.
It happens pretty common, actually.
Yeah. And the hard part is, and I don't know how you check for this, but you said maybe references, is that cues are sadly a thing that are stolen quite often if you don't keep a good eye on them. So if you buy a cue and you take it to the bar, if you're not with anybody else, I would be hard pressed to say go to the bathroom and leave it right there, because it might, especially if it's near the door, it might be gone when you get back. And that would be a hard thing to deal with, as if you bought a stolen cue. So I don't know how you would check for that, but
Well, and that's something I find surprising a lot, is how many duplicates are made of a single cue. And I've never seen the same. I've never ran in, all the cues I've had, I've never ran into somebody who has the exact same cue as me. Which just blows my mind, just because of how many
But
duplicates.
that can really vary from cue to cue, where you have mass production stuff like, Matt and I's cues. I mean, you could go out and find 1,000 of those out there, whereas a lot of manufacturers have limited runs of specific styles where there's only a couple hundred or 1,000. I don't know what the real numbers are, but there's also so much variety. It's
true.
It's hard to run into exactly what you're playing with.
Yeah.
So let's get a little bit deeper into these different elements we've talked about, just to give people a good compass for what the questions they need to be asking. So hopefully they can get to a shop if you've never shot cues before or a certain kind of brand before. Kind of give them a little information on this so they know what to start asking for. So let's talk about weight, because we've hit on that a little bit. The mid-range most popular weight is probably around 19 ounces. It's probably the most recommended. If somebody goes, what do I need to do? They'd probably just say, do 19, it's middle of the road. What does that mean, right? All cues I think that cost more than $100 will allow you to change the weight on them. And that's via a weight bolt in the back end. You saw a quick shot of that when we were in Jesse's shop. She actually changed some weight bolts out so those 3 cues weighed exactly the same. And each brand of cue will typically have a different kind of weight bolt, a different weight bolt system. It's another reason why some people just buy into a brand. Like I bought into the Predator brand and I bought the $100 weight changing system. And you know, I have to do that once if I keep buying Predator cues, right? But so that's something that you can dial in. You can change it by like 1/10 of an ounce, maybe even less than that. I don't even know.
Depending on the make, Predator's pretty good about that.
So
Others, I think, start off like in a 1/4 ounce, but yeah.
So just right underneath the rubber butt is just a bolt that's sitting back there when it requires a certain kind of tool, and you can spin it out, and it just, the length is, or the weight's varied off of the length of the bolt. It's just a hunk of metal in there that weighs, and it'll be printed right on there what it weighs typically. So, but yeah, so what are your guys' opinions on, I know this is a huge subject, but if you do have some quick thoughts on it, like about cue weight, what you'd recommend, things like that, things to avoid, things to gravitate towards.
Goes off a feel.
I feel like it's so
that's a tough
personal.
one. Yeah.
That's a
It's a
tough
personal preference. For me, it's more about the balance than the weight itself. It's about getting the right balance, and that could change from cue to cue. You might have a different weight because the density of this wood up here is heavier than the back end, so you're going to run heavier weight than you normally would. It's really about the balance for me. But
And when Rob's talking about balance, just so we don't skip over that really fast, is purely where is the center of balance on this cue going to be? I won't get you there, Jordan. Because that's going to change the overall feel of the hit as well, and just how the cue sits both in your grip hand and on your bridge hand as you're stroking the cue. So that's what he's talking about, balance.
and even that, there's no right answer to balance. It's what feels good for you. I've shot many McDermott's in the past, and that was the thing I hated about the McDermott's was the balance. They were balanced real weird. I always thought they were heavier than they were. I'd play a 19-ounce McDermott, it felt like it was 21 just because of the balance.
And they do make, there are things out there, like they do make little rings too to go in between your joint to add weight more to the front too, to help balance out the back.
Or like James and I both play with a 3-inch back extension. They actually make mid-cue extensions where of just about the same length. The intention with those are not only just to lengthen the cue, but they're actually called balance rights, and that further shifts the balance of the cue forward. And even higher end players sometimes prefer just the weight of the cue sitting further down on their bridge hand. It just feels like they've got more control, or the cue's more grounded, I guess.
That's the nice thing about Casey's cue here. The weight bolt can go as low as here, but it can come all the way up to here, so you can put the weight bolt where you want to change the balance on the pitch hours. And then they have weight forward shafts also that you can play if you wanted. I think those are usually just for braking, but you could play a weight forward shaft that weighs 2 ounces more than a typical shaft.
And you can find, I mean, if you have a cue sitting at home, you just kind of find where it balances on your hand. So if you wanted to kind of know where its balance point is, you can kind of figure it out that way.
That's useful once you know this is how I like my cue to be balanced, and then you do that and you go, okay, that's where I like my balance, and then you can easily check a cue and say, oh, yep, this is going to be good for me, or as you're adding weight or what have you, yep, that's where I know I like it.
So weight, personal preference, just like I think all these answers are ultimately going to be, but it helps kind of talking through the process. One of the things I guess I will add is typically a lot of players will say that the heavier a cue, the more easier it is to send in a straight line. It's more, it seems less flicky or finicky sometimes. But with that, some other people will say heavier Q is going to lose more finesse. But truly, it really depends on your body mechanics. I prefer a heavier Q, and I can get all kinds of crazy spin and snap on the ball. So I think it just really depends on how your stroke works. So
True.
yeah. So let's talk about tips. Now there are hundreds, I mean, I haven't done a calculation on this. I know there's hundreds of different tips you can buy, not only just brands, but then varying degrees of hardness of that tip that you can start playing. There's solid tips, there's laminated tips, so there's 12 different layers of leather in there. Do you guys have opinions on tips, things you would recommend, why you use a certain kind of one that you do?
I mean, I know if you're going off a majority of people break with a super hard tip, and they play with variations of medium to soft, I'd say. I do know there are people who play with a hard tip, but I think that's pretty difficult to do, although they may say otherwise.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I felt really good about having this thing in here about, well, you know, hard tips can be really hard to get a lot of spin, and a soft tip's going to have a lot of spin, but it's going to squirt a lot. And I just ended up reading this really long and boring document about how they've proven literally almost scientifically that has no bearing on it whatsoever. They've shown the hardest tips can get crazy spin, and they've shown that soft tips don't necessarily have a ton of squirt. It just depends on how you're able to use the shaft. You know, just like going back to, you know, in theory, if you're looking at science, a carbon fiber is going to shoot straighter or whatever. But if you're used to a maple shaft, a simple, plain, bare bones maple shaft, that's your jam, right? So it's kind of crazy. Well, just so people know, what do you get? If you know what tip you play with, what do you play with, Jordan?
I'd have to ask Rob because I bought it from him. I'm sure it's just a Predator, just whatever Predator put standard on there.
Standard on there, which
Oh,
I think is
314.
The
Victory.
It's a Victory medium.
Victory medium, yeah. And I like a medium, so I've liked it so far. So I haven't felt a need to change. But usually I do a medium soft, something if I were to change it.
I actually just made a change. Well, it's probably been 3 or 4 months now. So this is a Black King is the brand, and it's a medium, and it's the first medium tip I've had it put on by a local Q guy here. And I primarily played with softs, mainly Kamui. I tried a How, and I've been really happy with moving up from soft to medium. I don't have to mess with it as much, shape it. It doesn't seem to mushroom, and I couldn't get just as much, if not more, spin and control on the cue ball. I've been real happy with it.
No idea.
For some reason, I felt that was coming.
I mean, you knew that was coming.
So how long have you been playing with the tip that you have on your cue right now?
Since I got it from my teammate,
Which is how long ago?
2018.
So depending on the type of tip, if it's a really hard tip, it doesn't need a lot of work. It might actually last. I was actually talking to a tip guy the other day. He actually recommends, especially if you play a lot, you're swapping your tip every 6 months.
Yeah.
So this is something that's, in terms of cue maintenance, aside from if you have a wood shaft that you need to clean a lot, this is probably the most swapped out thing that goes in your cue. And that's why you might often hear, well, like, man, you've shot a lot of different tips. It's like, well, I got to change it a lot. It's not like you took a perfectly good tip off your cue most of the time. You typically wait. You're like, this isn't my favorite kind of tip, and you kind of wait for it to wear down unless it really bugs you, and then you go ahead and make the swap to something else to play with it. But typically, the idea is that just like if you got used to that standard maple shaft, you typically want to find a brand that you can stick with, and so you can find that consistency in your game, right? I think a lot of people try and chase this magical solution of things that are going to magically make them a professional pool player, and I don't think that's ever going to happen, especially if you keep changing your gear in crazy ways. That's my opinion. So I play with Zan mediums. I started playing with those a couple years ago because I couldn't find something I really liked. I actually do like the Victory mediums, but for me, the way I hit, they tend to mushroom out actually and would chunk out on me. And so I switched, and I've really enjoyed the Zan mediums. They're a really good baseline.
You know what's coming. Like, I have no clue what kind of tip I have. I do know that it sounds weird, but visually like this tip. It's longer. I
know
don't.
what you have.
What does she have?
I don't
See,
like
you
the
don't-
white part to be shorter for some reason, and it's a visual thing for me. So
I just
don't
don't.
like the
I don't go
ferrule.
through so many tips, man. Oh, you got the same one. Okay.
You have a Pachauer Gold.
I just really like the color gold, so that's probably why.
I like the
Drawn.
Pachauer Gold tips.
Where are they on the hardness?
So I'm playing a medium. Who knows what you're playing, but they go soft, medium, hard. I just started playing mediums recently. I used to play softs, but I had consistency issues with the softs. So decided to start trying out mediums. I'm bouncing between a Howe and a Pachauer right now. I like the Pachauers a lot because they have this gold ring that kind of tells me, yeah, it's time to change your tip, or at least I'm able to kind of track how much I'm wearing down my tip easier with that gold ring being there.
Oh, I just thought it was pretty.
Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, so for those who aren't aware, the softer tip, the more, when we say maintenance, what they're actually referring to is it starts losing its shape. It starts flattening down or starts mushrooming out. And so there's tools that you can buy, tip maintenance tools, where you can reform them, you can reshape them to get a nice curve to the tip. And again, that's another preference. Some people like a really flat tip, some like them really rounded. And that just, again, it can be the perfect setup for you, but terrible for the next person.
Right.
But that's a tendency to the softer to soft medium tips, is they just require more maintenance. The harder the tip is, the less work that they need. You might shape it once and you might be good to go for a while. So
Yeah. I have a hard time with a hard tip. I don't think anybody here plays it hard. It's just really hard to hit off center on the cue ball with a hard tip without miscuing at a higher percentage. So we'll stick with the medium. But I haven't really invested a whole lot of time and effort into going into all the different tips. I just try something different pretty much every time I go. One thing I will say is you do have to change your tips in Washington a little more often than some other places with the humidity. So moisture in the tip, and it starts playing differently.
DJ?
Mine is the stock one. I think it's a Tiger medium.
Sniper.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Those are pretty popular tips too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I am due for getting mine replaced, though. I think it's
And that's another great reason you probably won't be able to get that kind of high-end variety going to a shop to shoot and test cues. But definitely all of your buddies, what do you shoot with? Can I shoot with it? And just kind of more than one pop on the table, maybe play a rack or two and try different kinds of spin and different kinds of shots, so you can really feel, because they do have, just like all the other parts of the equation of the cue stick, a tip has a heavy influence on how your play is influenced. So
And some shops will most likely have a little bit of variety on different tips on different shafts, or who knows, maybe if it's a great shop, they go, hey, we got one in back or something. So
yeah.
The one thing we should add about this, we've talked about soft and medium and hard, but we also mentioned 5 or 6 different brands of tips. Brand A, B, C, D's softs are not the same. One
true.
soft is not equal to another soft. One medium is, they're varying different. I forget, do any of you guys recall what the hardness scale is?
I don't know what it is, but that reminded me of a very fantastic point. So if you're used to a certain kind of tip and you hear somebody uses a different kind of tip, well, how does that fall in order? Like, aside from you just feeling it out, I mean, is there something out there, some kind of guide or chart that you can look at so you can see what you're used to, and then you can use that to your existing knowledge to go, do I want to go hard or soft, or what is that? I know Pool Dog has a chart. You can actually just Google pool cue hardness chart, and it will be like one of the first hits, if not the best hit there, and you'll see this amazing layout of all of the tips, and you're like, oh my god, thank you. Like, this is so nice, because that's what I used to play with, and I wanted to go maybe a little harder, a little softer. What is that? Bam, there it is. So that's really a really nice guide for you guys to use. If you are familiar with a tip or two, that'll be a really great compass for you guys to make your next choice.
Absolutely.
and it's relatively inexpensive to have a tip changed out or redone. So if you have one, you don't like it, you get it changed out, to do it again isn't really gonna break your bank.
I would say for the purchase of the tip and install, it's usually between $40 and $50.
For a high-end tip.
That's a
Yeah,
high-end
yeah.
For a
tip.
high-end
Yeah,
That's
a high-end
high-end
tip's
tip.
usually like $25.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's what you're looking at for a really nice, feel good about it tip and install. So Cool. Let's see here. What do we got next on the list? Okay. It's probably pretty obvious considering they're on the table, but preferred shaft, how long you've been playing with it, and you plan on making changes. We've kind of beat down the shaft conversation a little bit,
Yeah.
but if you guys have anything that you want to add, feel free. No?
I feel like we've
Yeah.
kind of covered that. You know, we've pretty much run the gamut on the table here,
Yeah.
from maple to carbon, and there's a lot of variables in each. And I don't think we're gonna
Yeah.
really.
Sure. All right. Well, then the last thing I have on here is grip type. So we do actually have quite a bit of a variety on the table. So you've got no wraps. I think aside from the house cue, I'm the only no wrap on the table. And then we've got what we call linen wraps. Actually, we have a
There's
few.
a couple different
Yeah.
types
But
of
there
linen
are
wraps.
types of linen wraps,
Yeah.
and that's important to.
So
That's on non-wax.
one will be coated. Yeah, one will be waxed and one will be non-waxed. Right.
But then variations too, because you have some that are heavily done, and then some are bare bones, where you're really feeling the individual strings of linen.
Yeah. And then you've got leather. Is this leather?
Probably pleather.
Pleather.
But I don't call on that one. Actually, I think it is leather, but it's just leather embossed. It's not, because it does have an animal skin texture to it, but it's not really crocodile.
And then James, yours is leather.
Yeah, so this is a synthetic leather, which is, doesn't absorb as, like leather would, doesn't get as much oils. But yeah, there's probably leather and linen are the most common wraps. But quite a few people play with a wrapless cue as well.
I played with a linen wrap up until 2 cues ago, and I just like the fact because half my hand would be on the wrap, half it would be off the wrap. Again, I'm typically on the back end of the cue, and I just couldn't stand the inconsistency. So this is really nice and consistent. I think people get different grips for different reasons. Some people have sweaty hands; they don't have sweaty hands. There's going to be arguments for all that, just like everything else we're talking about today. So that's another thing to kind of look out for when you're testing cues. A couple players pointed out the 3 cues that we did test at Jesse's shop, that they liked a certain cue, but they wished it had a different kind of grip on it. So very interesting with that.
Yeah. Some people do have different strokes, like a slip stroke, and different cues allow you to do those kind of things too.
Yeah, I think the only other thing that's really a fairly popular thing, but not here, is actually like a rubber grip. And you'll typically find those more on your jumping cues and your breaking cues. Those are really sticky. You're not going to get a lot of slip, stroke action.
Almost like a golf club grip.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they do have those. I think are they tennis? They just roll on. Like literally, you can put them on any cue.
Oh, you're talking about.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
like rubbery kind. Yeah, I've seen people just roll them on, and so it's not like you even have to have it redone. You could just take it off and put it on another cue.
All right. So with that said, we've kind of, I hope, covered enough stuff here to paint a picture for people. There's no right answer for you. That's just like somebody else's. You're going to need to go out and find your own stuff. Is there anything that you guys would provide in terms of advice? Hey, dude, I need to go get a cue. I don't have one. I've never shot one before. Or maybe I've got an entry-level cue I'm looking to upgrade. What advice have we not given so far tonight that you would like to throw out there for them?
I think it's actually important for somebody that maybe is newer to go with somebody that isn't newer. And the reason why I say that is because when you're new, you don't know maybe the questions to ask about it. You don't know the difference of the tip. You don't know the difference of the joint. You don't know some of the items that somebody else has been playing maybe for 4+ years might know. So I think it's important if you have somebody on your team or you know somebody who's played a long time and they have experienced maybe a couple different cues themselves, that might be helpful to bring them along with you. I did when I got this one, and I had played a lot of other people's. I had luckily have a lot of people that trusted me to play with theirs so that I could get that feel and understanding of what I wanted. And I basically picked this one out because I had already played with somebody's very, very similar to it, and that's why I liked it. It wasn't about the cost. It wasn't about anything else except for I knew that that's how I liked to play. And then that person could help ask those questions so that they knew that the purchase I was making was probably a sound one for me as well.
I think the thing that I would put out there is, even if you have a queue, you feel really good about it. I'm all for local shop buying too. They might actually have the same queue you might find online cheaper because they might be having a sale or more inventory than they need. But especially if you're going to want to buy something online, make sure you've at least shot that brand before. Because like we said, all the brands tend to hit quite a bit differently. And you might hit that and be like, oh, I love the look of it, but man, that just, I can't stand the way that feels when you hit it. At least make sure that you've hit that brand before you go online to shop is what I'd recommend. Anything else, guys?
One thing I'd have to say is when you go, whether it be online or especially to a shop, go with a budget in mind. The max I want to spend is $500. Because if you don't give the person who's helping you a budget, they might throw you a $900 queue. You might hit it and go, oh, I love this thing, it works great. And then you hit the one that's $400 and you're like, I don't like that one, but yet the $900 one's way outside your budget. So best not to even, if you can't spend that kind of money, best not to even.
That's what credit cards are for.
We'll cut that piece out. Editing.
Awesome. Anything else, guys? Well, with all this queue talk and all this experience getting shared, you would think that we would know our queues really well. So what we ended up doing is we put this to an experiment, a test. And so we took all of our players, we stacked all of the queues, and we gave them a guessing game. So Alex, why don't you go ahead and roll the queue guessing game, I guess is what it's called. As pool players, we spend hundreds, if not thousands of hours playing with our queues. This develops a keen sense of even slight variations in queue weight, and it would seem when it comes to striking balls, the differences between your queue and others should be even more obvious. We put our cast to the challenge with a little game of Guess Your Queue. With all player sticks lined up and randomized, we challenge them to blindly guess their cue stick out of the bunch. Oh, and we also toss in a standard house cue just for fun. All sticks were tossed in a scale and recorded. Here are the players' sticks measured from lightest to heaviest to use for reference, so you can tell how their stick sits amongst the bunch and how close they guessed. Jordan has the lightest cue, coming in at an extremely low 17¼ ounce, and Matt on the other end of the spectrum having the heaviest with a 20.88. So between the entire range of cues, there's a 3.6 ounce variance. This is presumably a noticeable contrast in weight. First, we started with a simple weight test. Carefully handed each cue, they were allowed to only hold the cue by the grip hand and only hold it by the universal masking wrap we applied to every cue. Julietta started things off, and immediately we had our first incorrect guess. Surprisingly, Julietta selected the house cue, a stick that is over 2 ounces heavier than her own. DJ guessed James' cue, which is also a 2 ounce difference. Jordan also guessed the house cue, which is well over a 2 ounce difference from his own. What's going on here? We all thought going into this is going to be an easy feat. Rob selected DJ's as his own, but at least we're getting closer, with less than an ounce difference between their two cues. James also picked the ever so popular house cue, with it being within an ounce of his own. And Matt defied the trend and was able to sniff out his own cue and guess successfully. The cast was 1 for 6, not great. So apparently it is much harder to guess your own cue weight in a blind cue comparison. We were all quite surprised by the results, but surely when it comes to the cue hit comparison, we'd have better results, right? Here goes nothing. The hit test had each player already down at the table, carefully handed each cue so they couldn't feel any obvious differences. A cue ball was lined up for them, and they struck the cue ball down the table to fill the hit of each cue. Right out of the gate, Julietta redeems herself and gets the cast back on track by nailing it and guessing her own cue. DJ apparently has a love affair with James' cue, not only incorrectly picking it for the weight challenge, but also for the hit. It might be time for a new cue, DJ. Jordan was much closer this time around, but just barely missing by picking Julietta's cue, which is extremely close in weight and hit feel. Rob missed the mark by selecting Jordan's cue with over a 2 ounce difference. James was able to use his force powers and determine his own cue from the rest of the pack. And Matt was just off by selecting James' cue, less than a ½ ounce difference. So the squad upped their game, just slightly, with a 2 out of 6 score in the hit challenge. Overall, what do these results show? Everyone felt okay about the weight challenge, and most felt the hit challenge would be pretty obvious. But in the end, they were surprised at how hard it was. It's very interesting because as players, we have all hit a buddy's cue here and there, and it can often feel extremely strange and seemingly obvious in the differences from our own stick. There's clearly a lot more to the so-called feel of a stick, which goes well beyond the weight and the feel of the hit. There is the way the entire configuration of the stick moves the cue ball around the table with power, spin, and deflection, what gives us our sense of touch with a cue. Maybe we'll revisit this challenge down the road and see if the cast guesses change or stay the same. Do you think you'd be able to pick your cue out of a lineup of 7? Give this a shot and let us know how it goes.